The Galactic Confederation had welcomed humans to the interstellar community approximately 7 standard galactic cycles ago, or as humans insisted on measuring it, about 18 months. Most species found this obsession with planet-specific time units charmingly primitive, much like everything else about humanity. Jack Novak sat in the waiting area outside Admiral Krilltek's office, absently flipping a combat knife that technically violated 17 different Confederation weapons protocols. The receptionist, a gelatinous blob with 7 eye stalks, had given up trying to confiscate it after Jack had cheerfully demonstrated 3 different ways to conceal it on his person. "The Admiral will see you now," burbled the receptionist, its eye stalks quivering with obvious relief at the prospect of Jack becoming someone else's problem. Jack pocketed the knife and strode into the office, whistling a tune that, unbeknownst to him, translated in 3 different alien languages as a graphic mating proposal. Admiral Krilltek's, a meter-tall cephalopod-like being with glistening blue-green skin and 14 manipulator tentacles, visibly tensed as Jack entered. Next to him stood, or more accurately, existed Lieutenant Pax, a silicon-based lifeform resembling a humanoid sculpture made of basalt with glowing amber cracks for eyes. "Jackson Novak," Krilltek said, tentacles twitching nervously. "Former demolitions expert of the Earth Alliance, dishonorably discharged for he consulted his datapad. Creative reinterpretation of orders resulting in excessive property damage, but admittedly impressive results." Jack grinned. "That's a fancy way of saying I blew up the right stuff in the wrong way." "We've reviewed your record extensively," Lieutenant Pax said, her voice like grinding stones. "Your methods are chaotic and unpredictable, but your success rate is statistically anomalous." "Thanks. I think." Krilltek's skin rippled in what Jack had learned was their equivalent of a deep sigh. "Mr. Novak, the Confederation faces an unprecedented threat. The Zark Hegemony has developed a planet-killer superweapon called the Stellar Negator. It's hidden in an asteroid fortress in the Crimson Nebula." "Sounds dramatic," Jack commented, making himself comfortable in a chair designed for a species with significantly different anatomy. "What's it do?" "It ignites stars," Pax stated flatly. "Ah," Jack nodded. "That seems bad. Bad." Krilltek's tentacles flailed. "It's catastrophic. They've already tested it on an uninhabited system. The star went supernova within minutes," Jack whistled. "Neat tech. I mean, horrifying, obviously, but neat." Krilltek and Pax exchanged the universal look of, "Are all humans this strange?" that Jack had grown quite familiar with since joining the Confederation. "We need someone to infiltrate the fortress and disable the weapon before it can be deployed against populated systems," Pax continued. "All conventional forces would be detected and neutralized. We need unconventional tactics, so you called me," Jack nodded, understanding. "Smart move." You were our 27th choice," Krilltek admitted. "The previous 26 declined. Why?" "Because," Krilltek said gravely, his skin turning a somber shade of mauve, "it's a suicide mission." Jack blinked, then frowned. "For who?" The silence that followed Jack's question stretched until Pax finally broke it, her amber eyes flickering uncertainly. "For whoever attempts it," she explained slowly, as if talking to a particularly dense child. "The mission parameters indicate a 99.87% fatality probability." Jack cocked his head. "That leaves a 0.13% chance of survival. I've had worse odds in Vegas." "You misunderstand," Krilltek interjected, pulling up a holographic display of the asteroid fortress. "This installation has 15 layers of security, automated defense systems capable of vaporizing capital ships, and is manned by the Hegemony's elite Dreadguard troops." Jack nodded, studying the projection with surprising intensity. "What's this ventilation system here?" "Those are thermal regulation conduits, not ventilation," Pax corrected. "Humans always assume everywhere needs ventilation like they do." "And what's powering the weapon?" Jack asked, ignoring the slight. Krilltek expanded the hologram. "The Stellar Negator harnesses dark energy through a quantum entanglement matrix. Its core contains enough energy to make a really big boom if disrupted improperly," Jack finished, grinning. "Got it." This isn't amusing. Human. Krilltex's skin flushed a stressed orange. The weapon will be operational in 7 standard days. If it is, the hegemony will demand the Confederation's unconditional surrender or face stellar extinction. Jack raised his eyebrows. So you want me to sneak in and sabotage this doomsday machine? Correct, Pax confirmed. Though sabotage undersells the complexity. You would need to reconfigure the quantum matrix to create a localized implosion that destroys the weapon without triggering a stellar cascade. That's assuming you can bypass the Dreadguard, penetrate 15 security layers, and reach the core, Krilltex added anxiously. Each step has been calculated as virtually impossible. The mission would require knowledge of advanced physics, exceptional combat skills, stealth expertise, slicing abilities, and improvisational thinking beyond rational prediction, Pax continued. The combined skill set doesn't exist in any known species. Jack leaned back, balancing his chair on 2 legs. So you're saying I need to be a demolitions expert, a hacker, a commando, a physicist, and slightly crazy? Yes. Which is why no rational being would accept this mission, Krilltex said. Jack let the chair drop forward with a thud. When do I start? You accept? Krilltex's tentacles froze in shock. Sure, sounds fun, Jack shrugged. You'll provide a ship, right? Pax's stony features didn't change, but her amber eyes flickered rapidly, the silicon equivalent of bewilderment. Mr. Novak, she said carefully, perhaps you don't fully comprehend. The statistical likelihood of your death is… Look, Jack interrupted, I've been blowing stuff up professionally since I was 19. I once demolished a fortified bunker with a can of soda and some dental floss. If there's one thing humans know how to do, it's make things go boom on our terms. Krilltex's skin cycled through several colors of distress, but the Dreadguard alone would. Admiral, Jack said, suddenly serious, does the Confederation have any other options? The Admiral's tentacles drooped. No, then it doesn't matter if it's suicide, someone has to try. Jack grinned again, the momentary seriousness vanishing. Besides, whoever said it was suicide clearly never met me. The mission assessment team included the 12 greatest tactical minds in the Confederation, Pax noted. Did any of them ever blow up their high school pool to get out of a swim meet? I don't believe that was among their credentials, Pax admitted. Then they don't know what humans are capable of when we're properly motivated. Jack rubbed his hands together. Now, show me what I'm working with. This is the Star Skimmer, Krilltex announced as they entered the hangar bay. A stealth corvette with experimental cloaking technology. Jack whistled appreciatively at the sleek black vessel. Nice. Does it have weapons? It's a stealth ship. Pax replied flatly. Weapons would compromise its signature. Right, Jack nodded. So that's a no. What about defensive capabilities? The cloaking is the defense, Krilltex explained. If detected, the ship lacks the structural integrity to withstand military-grade weapons. Jack stared at them. So you're giving me a ship made of tissue paper and hope? The ship is constructed from metaphor, Pax. Jack sighed. Let's check out the inside. As they boarded, a pleasant feminine voice greeted them. Welcome aboard. I am Betty 912, Biological Electronic Tactical Intelligence. You may call me Betty. Hey Betty, Jack grinned at the nearest sensor. You and I are going to be friends. That seems unlikely. Specialist Novak. My programming does not include friendship protocols. We'll work on that. The next 4 hours consisted of Jack requisitioning a bewildering array of items that made increasingly less sense to the alien officials. His list included duct tape, lots of it, 20 kilograms of standard fertilizer, a dozen energy bars, the chocolate ones, not those weird alien protein squares, 16 meters of copper wiring, a standard medical kit, 3 bottles of that Arcturian whiskey stuff, as many flash bangs as you can spare, a portable music player loaded with classic rock. Lieutenant Pax observed Jack packing these items with methodical precision. Your preparation seems haphazard. That's because you're missing the interconnections, Jack replied, not looking up from his work. Explain. It's like jazz, Jack said, carefully arranging tools in his tactical vest. You need to feel it. I do not feel. Pax stated. That might be your problem right there, Jack winked. Meanwhile, Krilltex was reviewing Jack's hastily scrawled plan, which consisted mainly of question marks, doodles and arrows pointing to areas labeled improvise here. This isn't a plan. The Admiral protested, tentacles writhing in distress. This is barely even a suggestion. Plans never survive contact with the enemy. Jack shrugged. Better to have a flexible framework. But the security systems alone require precise timing and… Betty, Jack interrupted. Can you sync with my neural implant? That functionality is not standard protocol. The AI replied. But can you do it? A pause. Yes, great. Do that. I'll need real-time analysis while I'm in there. Krilltex's skin turned a pale, sickly yellow. Neural synchronization is extremely dangerous with an untested AI interface. You could suffer brain damage or personality corruption. Jack was already attaching interface nodes to his temples. Risk assessment is all about context, Admiral. Compared to the mission itself, this is like jaywalking. I do not understand that reference, Betty commented. It means we're bending rules for good reasons, Jack explained. Now, link up and let's see what you can do. The neural link activated with a soft chime. Jack blinked rapidly as information flooded his consciousness. Whoa. That's intense. Neural synchronization at 87%, Betty announced, a voice now audible inside Jack's head. I have access to your sensory inputs and can provide real-time data analysis. Can you also play AC/DC while doing that? Yes. Ace. Perfect. Best. Krilltex watched in horror as Jack continued preparing, now talking to himself or rather to Betty, while packing increasingly concerning combinations of materials. You're going to get yourself killed, the Admiral finally said. Jack paused, looking genuinely puzzled. Admiral, with all due respect, if I don't do this, billions die, right? Yes, but… Then it doesn't matter if it's suicide, Jack said simply. Either I pull this off, or I go out trying to save a bunch of species that still think humans are crazy primitives. He grinned. Besides, who knows? Maybe we are crazy, but sometimes crazy is exactly what you need. The star skimmer slipped through the crimson gases of the nebula like a shadow through smoke. Jack sat in the pilot's seat, feet up on the console, munching an energy bar while Betty handled the actual navigation. Proximity alert, Betty announced in his mind. Hegemony patrol craft at Vector 273. Can they see us? Jack asked, not bothering to take his feet down. Negative. Cloaking systems functioning at optimal capacity. Cool. He crumpled the wrapper and tossed it into a growing pile. How long until we reach the fortress? They're approximately 17 minutes at current velocity. Jack nodded and reached for his bag, pulling out a small flask of Arcturian whiskey. The comms system suddenly crackled to life. Specialist Novak, Admiral Krilltex's voice was tight with tension. Status report. Oozing through a pretty red cloud. About to crash a heavily guarded doomsday party. The usual Tuesday. This is not a joking matter. Krilltex protested. Are you maintaining communications silence? Following the approach vector? The mission parameters clearly state. Relax, Admiral, Jack interrupted. Betty's handling the flying, I'm handling the strategizing, and everything's going according to plan. What plan? You don't have a plan. That's my plan. Keep up, Lieutenant Pax's stony voice cut in. What Specialist Novak means is that he's implementing adaptive tactical responses based on evolving battlefield conditions. Jack grinned. See? Rock Lady gets it. I do not get it, Pax replied. I am merely translating your chaos into terms the Admiral might accept. Asteroid Fortress on visual, Betty announced, bringing up a holographic display. The massive asteroid loomed before them, its surface bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. Artificial structures had been built into and around it, giving the impression of a metallic fungus consuming a rock. Well, that's cheerful, Jack muttered. Betty, find me a blind spot. There are none, Betty replied. The sensor coverage is comprehensive and layered. Nothing's perfect, Jack said, studying the display. What about those thermal regulation conduits Pax mentioned? They are heavily shielded and monitored. Jack's eyes narrowed. But they have to vent heat somewhere. 15 minutes later, the star skimmer was positioned near a particularly active thermal vent. Jack, now suited in a heat-resistant EVA suit modified with various questionable attachments, prepared to launch himself directly into the thermal exhaust stream. Specialist Novak, Krilltex's voice was nearly hysterical. This approach is not remotely sane. The temperature in those vents exceeds. It's fine, Jack interrupted. I've reinforced the suit with the duct tape. Duct tape is not rated for thermal protection in space. Not with that attitude, Jack replied cheerfully. He turned to the ship's internal sensor. Betty, cut comms for a bit. I need to focus. Communication suspended. Betty confirmed in his mind. Jack, I feel compelled to inform you that the Admiral's concerns are statistically valid. This method of insertion has a projected survival rate of less than 7%. At better odds than the mission as a whole. Jack shrugged. Ready for some thermal surfing? I cannot experience readiness, but my systems are prepared to assist. Close enough. Open the airlock on my mark. The airlock opened, and Jack launched himself into space, directly toward the thermal vent. The superheated plasma billowed out in rhythmic pulses, and Jack timed his approach to slip in during the momentary lull between bursts. Thermal pulse in 3, 2, 1, Betty counted down. Jack twisted his body, using the maneuvering thrusters on his modified suit to slip between waves of heat that would have vaporized a less prepared or less lucky infiltrator. The vent tunnel was a hellish tube of superheated metal and energy, but Jack had calculated, with Betty's help, exactly how much heat his jury-rigged suit could withstand for the necessary duration. He rocketed through the conduit, metal groaning around him as the suit's temperature climbed to dangerous levels. External temperature exceeding safety parameters, Betty warned. How long until we reach the internal junction? Approximately 12 seconds at current velocity. Suit integrity? Failing. Failing. Specifics, Betty. Outer layer compromised. Middle layer at 79% integrity. Inner layer beginning to degrade. Jack grimaced. Gonna be close. The end of the vent appeared ahead, a reinforced grate designed to prevent exactly this type of infiltration. Jack pulled a shaped charge from his belt and slapped it onto the grate as he approached. A fire in the hole. The charge detonated with precision, blowing the grate inward without compromising the surrounding structure. Jack hurtled through the opening, his suit literally smoking, and crashed onto the floor of a maintenance bay. Rolling to extinguish any flames, he quickly stripped off the outer layer of the suit and checked his equipment. Remarkably, most of it had survived. Betty? Status? Internal sensors detect no immediate security response. However, environmental systems will register the thermal anomaly within approximately 40 seconds. Jack nodded, already moving. Where's the nearest access to the security systems? 3 levels down, Junction 7B. Perfect. Jack pulled out his tablet and connected it to a nearby data port. Let's give them something else to worry about. With a few commands, he initiated a program that would trigger minor system fluctuations throughout the facility, nothing big enough to cause alarm, but sufficient to keep security techs busy chasing ghosts. Jack, Betty's voice had taken on a slightly concerned tone. The Dreadguard patrol schedule indicates a security sweep of this sector in 6 minutes. Jack grinned. Then we'd better not be here in 6 minutes. 3 hours into the infiltration, Jack had successfully navigated 12 security layers through a combination of slicing, misdirection, and what Krilltex would definitely classify as excessive property damage. He now stood before the entrance to the weapon core, separated from his objective by a final biometric security gate. This is problematic, Betty observed in his mind. The system requires genetic authentication from a Zark High Commander. Jack nodded, examining the security panel. Yeah, figured it would come to this. Time for Plan C. I don't recall discussing a Plan C. That's because I just made it up. Jack reached into his bag and pulled out a small device. Remember when I asked for those biochemical samples from the Confederation database? The request classified as probably illegal but necessary? That's the one. Jack attached the device to the security panel. This contains synthesized Zark DNA markers, should confuse the system just long enough to. The panel suddenly flashed red, and alarms blared throughout the facility. Or not. Jack finished with a sigh. Time for Plan D, which is... Captured, obviously. Before Betty could respond, Jack had already dropped his weapons and raised his hands as the corridor filled with Dreadguard troops, hulking reptilian soldiers in powered armor, their weapons trained on the lone human. Betty, Jack subvocalized, initiate sleeper protocol. Confirmed. Neural connection entering dormant state. Jack was roughly seized and dragged before the facility commander, a tall, imperious Zark named General Vexcon, whose scaled face regarded the human with contemptuous amusement. A human? The general hissed, circling Jack, who was now restrained in the center of the command chamber. The Confederation sends a single human to stop us. To be fair, Jack shrugged against his restraints. They said it was a suicide mission. And yet you came anyway. Typical human stupidity. Oh, bravery, Jack suggested. Though the line between those is pretty thin. Vexcon snorted. Your infiltration was detected the moment you entered the thermal vent. We merely allowed you to proceed to discover your objective. This was a lie. Jack had triggered the alarm intentionally, but he maintained a disappointed expression. Darn. And here I thought I was being sneaky. Take him to the core chamber. Vexcon ordered his guards. I want him to witness the weapon's activation before his execution. Let him report his failure to whatever afterlife humans believe in. As Jack was marched through the fortress toward the core, he mentally counted corridors and access points, building a more detailed map than any Confederation intelligence had managed to create. When they reached the massive chamber housing the Stellar Negator's core, a swirling vortex of dark energy contained within crystalline matrices, he let out an appreciative whistle. Gotta admit, that's impressive engineering, he said to the nearest guard, who shoved him roughly forward. General Vexcon approached a control panel. In 1 hour, this weapon will fire upon the Confederation capital star. Millions will perish instantly, and the rest will surrender. He turned to Jack with a cruel smile. Any last words, human? Jack looked around thoughtfully. Just one question: is that primary stabilizer supposed to be making that noise? All heads turned toward the innocuous device Jack had indicated. In that moment of distraction, Jack activated the neural link with Betty. And now, several things happened simultaneously. The small devices Jack had planted during his captured march through the facility activated, disrupting power to key systems. Betty, who had used the neural link to access the fortress's internal network, triggered emergency containment protocols, sealing the Dreadguard forces in secondary chambers. And Jack, who had intentionally dislocated his thumb during transport, slipped his restraints and launched himself toward the control panel. Stop him. Vexcon roared, but Jack was already at the controls. Betty, execute override gamma. The lights throughout the chamber flickered as Betty seized control of the facility's systems. Jack's fingers flew over the controls, reconfiguring the quantum matrix just as he and Betty had planned. Vexcon lunged at Jack, scaled hands extended like claws. You'll doom us all. Not all, Jack corrected, dodging the general's attack. Just you and your planet killer. With a final command, Jack locked the core into a feedback loop. The crystalline containment began to glow with increasing intensity. Betty, extraction plan. Calculating optimal route, Betty responded. Escape pod bay is 3 levels up. Section 12. Jack sprinted from the chamber as Vexcon howled orders to his scattered forces. The fortress shuddered as secondary systems began to fail, the core's destabilization spreading through the facility. Time to detonation? Jack asked, racing through corridors now filled with panicking Zark personnel. 4 minutes, 17 seconds, and cutting it close. Jack reached the escape pod bay, only to find it guarded by 2 Dreadguard soldiers. Without breaking stride, he hurled one of his remaining flashbangs. The disoriented guards were still struggling to recover when Jack knocked them unconscious with precisely placed strikes. 1 minute, 43 seconds. Betty warned as Jack launched the escape pod. The tiny vessel shot away from the asteroid fortress, accelerating to maximum speed. Behind him, the fortress began to glow from within as the quantum matrix collapsed. Betty, where's the star skimmer? Rendezvous coordinates locked. Impact in 37 seconds. Jack strapped himself in as the pod tumbled through space. That's going to be tight. A detonation in 10, 9, 8. Jack closed his eyes. Come on, baby. Just a little longer. A321. The asteroid fortress imploded with devastating force, the dark energy collapsing inward rather than expanding outward exactly as Jack had intended. The shockwave caught the escape pod, sending it spinning wildly off course. Betty. Status: no response. The neural link had been severed. As consciousness faded, Jack saw a sleek black shape moving toward his tumbling pod. Jack awoke in the medical bay of the Confederation flagship, surrounded by familiar faces. Krill techs, whose tentacles were uncharacteristically still with shock, Pax, whose rocky features seemed somehow less severe, and a holographic projection of Betty, who had been upgraded with a visual avatar. "He's awake," Betty announced, her holographic face showing what appeared to be relief. "Impossible," Pax stated, amber eyes flickering rapidly. "By all statistical models, you should be dead," Jack groaned, pushing himself upright. "Statistics and I have a complicated relationship." Krill techs moved closer, skin shifting through colors of disbelief. "You destroyed the Stellar Negator, escaped the blast radius, and survived vacuum exposure for nearly 2 minutes before rescue. No creature should have survived such conditions. Humans are surprisingly resilient," Jack shrugged, then winced at the pain the movement caused. "Did we get any data on the weapon before it went boom?" "Complete schematics," Betty confirmed. "I downloaded the entire weapons database during our neural link. The Confederation now has countermeasures should another such device be constructed." "Nice," Jack nodded. "So mission accomplished." "More than accomplished," Krilltech said, tentacles now rippling with excitement. "The hegemony has withdrawn to their core systems. Your destruction of their superweapon has forced them into peace negotiations." Jack blinked. "That's actually better than I expected. There is significant interest in your methods," Pax noted. "The Tactical Command wishes to debrief you extensively." Jack grinned. "They want to know how the crazy human pulled off the impossible." "Essentially, yes," Pax agreed. "Your approach defied all conventional strategic doctrine, yet succeeded where traditional methods would have failed." "There's a lesson there," Jack said, reaching for a cup of water. Krilltech's skin shifted to a curious blue. "What lesson?" "Sometimes you need to send a human to do an impossible job," Jack smiled, raising his cup in a toast. "Because we're too stubborn to accept that it's suicide." "For the record," Betty added, a holographic face showing a distinctly mischievous expression, "I've analyzed your methods extensively, and I still can't determine if you were brilliant or insane." Jack laughed. "The best human plans are always a bit of both." As the medical staff entered to check on him, Jack overheard Krilltech speaking quietly to Pax in the corridor outside. "Perhaps we've been underestimating humans all along," the Admiral mused. "Indeed," Pax replied. "Though I maintain that they are extremely primitive." "Primitive?" "Yes, but I'm beginning to think that might be their greatest strength." Jack smiled to himself. The next time someone told a human a mission was suicide, they might think twice about what that really meant. For the rest of the galaxy, it was a lesson worth learning. When a human asks suicide for who, you'd better start running.